This weekend for us is all about connection. That shouldn't be a shock for those of you who know natural lifemanship. About connecting with ourselves, and that's really what body-based therapies are all about. And the risk sometimes when we think about body-based therapies is that we're so inward-looking, right? And we're focusing on what's happening with our own bodies, our own physiology, our own thoughts and feelings, sensations, all of those. And sometimes what happens, if we're not careful, is that we can then forget about the main point, which is also relationships with others, right? So in relationship, we talk a lot about our relationship with our Creator, whatever your spiritual belief system is. So this weekend is about connecting with myself so I can connect with others. And horses fall in that. Animals in general fall into the others category, okay? And so what we're going to be doing our really best to do, and this is a risk, this can be hard, is we're going to still interact with horses all weekend. We have horses in the breakout sessions. We'll have horses in some of these large group presentations that we're doing. And, you know, the risk is that none of these horses have we built a relationship with for sometimes any amount of time. I don't know if, do you know this horse a little bit?
No.
No. They said just grab one of the horses in there and, right? So the picture that I'd like to start painting is connection is on a continuum, right? And it's through connection and relationship that we change and we grow and we heal. And sometimes we have deep, deep connection in an intimate relationship, and that's deeply healing. And I can remember times, though, that I've had an interaction with somebody at a grocery store that was connecting, and it helped me for that day. I have a couple moments that will bring tears to my eyes, actually. And there was somebody who I don't know their name, and I don't even know anything about them much. I mean, sometimes I know a little bit of story. It's funny, you'll know story, but not the name. So the deal is, in any interaction, I can come into that interaction with power, domination, and control. I can go to Walmart and I can interact with the checker in a transactional kind of way. And it's just a transaction. They're just doing something for me, right? Or I can connect. And sometimes connection is nothing more than eye contact and something that's internal, right? So that's what we're talking about this weekend, is starting to build in these interactions that we have with each other. Some of you will leave with deep connections, but we probably won't connect with 120 people on that level. My hope is we all connect on some level here, and with the animals that we're going to be working with.
So when we're working with horses, it's the same way. It can be a transaction, or it can be a connection. And our goal is always for it to be a connection, and to avoid transactions with horses, because we want their day to be better and we want ours to be better, and we know that that happens through connection, not transaction.
We're going to be learning about a lot of modalities, right? None of us will be trained in sensory motor psychotherapy or somatic experiencing, EMDR. We've got so many cool different models of therapy here. My hope is that we get tools, that we all go back with tools, but even more than that, that there's something about this conference that just awakens your imagination. There's so many places to go in equine therapy. And you know, Tim and I get to hear it all the time through consultation with many of you who are going through our certification process, and hear the really cool things people are doing out there and the ways that they're blending other modalities with this work. So that's one hope, is that you leave going, oh my God, there are all these amazing options, right? The other is, I hope you find the place you're gonna spend money next. I don't mean us. I mean There are some really amazing trainings out there, and the people that do this work really well are the people that have gotten lots and lots of different training and different modalities, learning about trauma, and so you'll get some hopefully amazing exposure to some of the modalities that we think blend really well with equine therapy. A lot of these body-based therapies are a perfect match. You want to add anything to why are we here?
Well, you know, a lot of us are on our own personal journey. We all are. And the way we get to where we want to go can look a million different ways. I, for one, am in recovery from cowboy dancing. I've been going to a cowboy dancing group. It's a 2-step program. What?
Just carry on. I'm just listening. I didn't know. I had no idea.
But mainly what we want to do is we want everyone to understand that there are no limits to what you can do to help people. And don't be limited by any one model. We never want anyone to be limited by what they learn from us and what they can do to help people. And we want to continue to learn how to better help people as the same way we encourage all of y'all. So we brought a lot of people here to help us grow past what we are. And with the hopes that someday we're all going to be so wonderful at this that none of us will have a job.
So what is natural lifemanship? We have a new tagline. Have y'all noticed this? We just kind of threw it on the website a few weeks ago. So it's the science and art of connected relationships. That's what we believe we do. Those of you who know us know we talk lots about science, and we're really aware that there is an art to doing therapy and helping people, right? So natural lifemanship is a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking about life. It's a way of thinking about relationships. It's a therapy model. It's an education model. And really, it's a way to help people grow, learn, change, and heal through relationships. Relationship with self and relationship with others. And that's really what we do. We do a lot of work with people who don't necessarily do anything with horses. We work with schools and we work with parents and juvenile justice systems and various things like that. But the horses are who teach us. And so this weekend, our focus, though, is on the therapy and the helping side of what we do, where we're partnering people and horses. And since we believe that the relationship is where that change is happening, the way in which the relationship happens matters to us a lot. The way that connection is built with horses matters a lot. Historically, we have not interacted with horses in a way that most people would consider healing. We have operated out of a place of power and domination and control a lot, okay? So we'll be talking a lot about partnership and connection and relationship this weekend.
And over the years, of course, there have been a lot of people that make a living teaching you how to be kinder in the way that you dominate a horse. And we're not about that. We think control is bad unless you're using it on yourself. So no matter how kindly you control a horse, it's still control. And in the horse training world, they've gone from physical abuse to emotional abuse, where they will even say, if I can control a horse's feet, I can control his mind. Controlling someone else's mind is emotional abuse. And we're not interested in controlling a horse's mind. We're interested in a horse figuring out how to control his own mind. and helping them get to the place, just like with our clients, where they can use their entire brain to do that, not just the survival parts of their brain. So we're going to be talking a lot about that. Most of the stuff that we're doing this week during this conference is to help you learn how to help your clients get better control of their own minds, starting at the bottom and working their way all the way to the top. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to be doing today or this week is going to be about regulating your own brain, where you can control what your brain is doing to you instead of turning that control over to someone else, and instead of having to control someone else, which is exactly what we try to do with horses, is help them develop the parts of their brain that allow them to control themselves, and both of us still remain safe in that interaction. This is the hardest thing for most people with horse experience to really buy into, is that a horse has the ability to appropriately control himself. Doesn't have to be controlled by me or anyone else. But like a 2-year-old child, we have to help them develop the parts of their brain that make that possible, because they're not born with those parts of the brain well developed, just like a human child is not born with the ability to do calculus. They have to develop those parts of their brain to make that possible. And a lot of our model is how do we help horses and people develop those parts of their brain that make that self-control possible.
All right, so we put just a few of the basic principles that we're going to operate off of over the weekend. So the first is that a good principle is a good principle regardless of where it's applied, okay? So when all the time in consultation, when we're having conversations with people and they say something about something related to a horse, we say exactly that, but put a person's name with it, and does it work? So do the principles that we're using, do they work everywhere? Do they work with the animals we interact with and also the people, okay? The other is that if it's not good for both, it's eventually not good for either. Okay, mull it over. We're going to come back to that lots this weekend. And then the other thing that we put there that's really connected is healing at the expense of another is not true healing. So if it's bad for the horse, but it's good for your client, then is it really good for your client? And so we have to start thinking about. These are the things that we're starting to think about as we even think about animal welfare. There's lots of conversation right now in this field about welfare and how it affects the animals. So without talking at length about this, if it's a welfare issue, I would argue it's also a clinical issue. If it's a welfare issue, it's also an issue for your client. Okay? We're going to come back to that some this weekend as well. All right. We are going to jump into some quick brain stuff just to make sure we're all on the same page. Some of you have seen this a billion times. We're going to be the entire weekend coming back to some really simple brain stuff, okay? We've done a lot of learning with a guy named Dr. Bruce Perry, and he divides the brain into these 4 sections, okay? So brain stem, and you have lots on this picture here that has the nice colors. This comes from Dr. Bruce Perry. Brain stem is the part of the brain that handles all of our automatic functions, okay? Things that we typically don't think about. Breathing, heart rate, appetite, those kinds of things, okay? Muscle tension. Diencephalon in midbrain is the part of the brain responsible for movement, okay? Limbic system is connection. This is extremely important for what we're going to be talking about the whole entire weekend, okay? The part of the brain responsible for relationships, emotions, feelings, connections, what we're going to talk about a lot, attachment, we're going to talk about attachment here in a little bit too. And then neocortex is the part of the brain responsible for thinking, okay? The most important thing here, and I want you all to think about what we just did with Mary, okay? The first thing, what was the first thing Mary, when we did our circle over there, what's the first thing Mary asked us to do? Yep, she asked us to listen, to get grounded, to sit, and just let things come in. That's what this is here when I say passive input. She asked us to we didn't have to do anything to get that input, we just got to hear it, okay? There could have also, think about your 5 senses. There's our ways that we can have input coming into our brain that regulates the brainstem, okay? It's really important that we start breaking apart brainstem and diencephalon when we're talking about trauma-informed care, because some of the stuff that we did at the end where we had to get up and move around, if we have somebody who's really frozen and they're deep down into their brainstem, they can't move, okay? So we have to do something to help them regulate down here, okay? So I do think this has, your next picture that's kind of all messed up, okay? Does have this, so you can take it home. You can try to, I don't know how hard it is to see this. Rhythmic, patterned, repetitive, something, there's a blank, okay, is what regulates our brain. It depends on which part of the brain we're talking about, okay? So for brain stem, it's rhythmic, patterned, repetitive, passive sensory input. That's what regulates the brain stem, okay? Flute music did that. Whenever we're watching and we watch the trees move, there's no breeze today, which is actually nice because it's a little chilly for Texas people. The things that we see help our brain to regulate. Y'all can also, I'm seeing some people do this and squint at this picture. Feel free to come down here later and just take a picture of it. I'll leave it up, or, photograph it or something, okay? So we're going to come back to this all weekend, okay? It's that passive sensory input, the things that we see, the things that we feel on our skin, the sounds, tastes, smells, all of those. Rhythmic, patterned, repetitive. As we move up into the brainstem, then it's rhythmic, patterned, repetitive, active input, meaning I have to do something to get that sensory input. So it's movement. I put movement, it's really small here, but it says movement, okay? This is if I wanted to regulate by swaying a little bit, right? Doing something like this. If I want to go for a walk, go for a bike ride, okay? All of those things. Then relational interactions that are rhythmic, patterned, and repetitive is what will regulate the limbic system. Rhythm is predictable. I should have put in parentheses here, predictable. So predictable relational interactions. And we're going to do a little bit here with this horse. And then these predictive, rhythmic, patterned, repetitive, cognitive interventions are neocortex. We are not going to hang out here a whole lot this weekend. You're going to be having to engage this. Sorry, Courtney doesn't like this one. We are going to be hanging out here some, but we're not going to hang out here teaching you how to do this part, because for the most part, when we help people regulate these 3 regions, this part of the brain wakes up and can do what it needs to do.
Well, and because a lot of y'all have come to our trainings and we understand the limited ability you have to engage that part of your brain. I'm not picking out anyone in particular, but you know who you are.
All right. 2 words, they're loaded words, we put definitions for on the top of, I think it's the 2nd page, back of that page. We're going to talk about these words all weekend, so we might as well just get them out of the way, okay? This first one is the word self-regulation or regulation. We're going to be talking about it all the time, okay? There's actually a lot of definitions for this word, but I picked one from Dr. Perry that I like. It says, when we act in response to the sensations and feelings that arise from our brain's alarm systems. So most of us, when we think about self-regulation or self-control, we're thinking about something like, okay, I got really angry this morning, right? And I managed that anger, right? I did not hit anybody, throw anything, throw a chair, whatever. I didn't smear poop all over the wall. It's one of the favorites of some of the kids Tim and I were singing a while back. So I didn't do any of those things when I got angry and dysregulated, right? That's a feeling, and I managed it. What we forget about sometimes is this idea about sensations, and I want us to think about sensations as well, okay? So it's as simple as I feel hunger, and so I eat. I act in response to a sensation that I feel in my body, okay? We're talking about trauma-informed care, right? A lot of our training is in trauma. And people who've experienced trauma often don't feel hunger. Or if they feel hunger, they figure out how to not feel it, and they don't do anything about it. So that's not regulation. Self-regulation is when I feel that sensation, I do something. I feel cold, so I put on a jacket. Tim and I had a client many years ago, we were in New Mexico, that came to sessions when it was like negative 20 degrees in t-shirts, right? Because she did not notice those sensations in her body, okay? So sensations happen here. This is these lower parts of my body. I feel hunger, I feel cold, I feel sensations in my body. Regulation is when I notice it and I act in response to it, okay? Same thing with feelings, right? I feel a feeling, I notice I have the feeling, and I act in response to that feeling, as opposed to it hijacking my whole world. Same with sensations, okay? Children start learning this kind of stuff at a really young age, right? It's like at a 2-year-old, they say, hey, I'm hungry, and you say, okay, snack time will be in about 10 minutes. And they learn that they can feel hunger for a little bit of time, but that they will be able to act in response to that hunger. Okay, so y'all can, the way I just said that, you can see where if that's not what happens, what starts to happen to our system. Okay, another way to think about self-regulation, it's right there still, is the neocortex, this part of the brain, so this is the reasoning part of the brain, is able to guide all of this, okay, or override all of this if necessary, okay? So maybe I have a feeling of anger. We'll use that example again. I have that feeling of anger, and I want to, I have a feeling of wanting to throw chairs and cuss somebody out, right? But maybe my neocortex in that situation does actually override what I'm wanting, what my body is wanting to do in response, okay? So in order to do that, we have to have an integrated brain. So that's sort of our next word, okay, is integration. We're going to be talking about that a lot. So brain integration is basically the brain's ability to communicate across regions smoothly and effectively, okay? So just think about, we're supposed to have these connections throughout the whole entire brain that make it possible for the brain stem, for example, to communicate with the neocortex, right? Or for the limbic system to be able to communicate with the neocortex. So there's linkages, right, between I can have a thought and a feeling at the same time. I can have a sensation and a thought at the same time, okay? And so many of the models of people that will be teaching you things this weekend will use other language to talk about some of these same concepts, okay? But people will be talking, tomorrow, Yvonne and I are presenting on EMDR. And we're going to be talking about, basically, with different words, how do we get the connections throughout the brain that we need so that the whole brain works together, okay? And Tim sort of said that a minute ago, too, and he said we want the whole brain to be working. And that's integration, basically. We spend, in our trainings, at least 2 days talking about the way that we build the relationship with the horse, okay? We're about to do a crash course in about 20 minutes here, okay? So the primary goal, some of you may have already seen this picture, some of you, even if you've been to a training, haven't. This little Venn diagram. We talk about attachment and detachment, and that our goal, no matter which one we're in, is connection. And the way that we build a secure attachment with anybody is that we are able to be connected when we're with them and when we're not with them. That's kind of what secure attachment is, okay? Attachment meaning closeness, connection with closeness, and detachment is connection with a little bit of distance, okay? We try to think flexibly about this in our model. We don't always mean that someone's in a round pen, that our horses has to always be in a round pen. There are numerous reasons related to logistics that we use round pens. It's an office in some ways, many of our programs. But Tim's going to spend some time talking with y'all about how do we start building connection with a horse that he's never met by asking this horse to be with him, asking this horse to be away from him a little bit, being away from the horse some, just this dance of attachment and detachment, okay? The comings and goings in a relationship and what that looks like. Because throughout the weekend, as we're doing different things, this will come into play. Maybe different language, but we're gonna come back to how do we build that connection when I'm with you and when I'm not? And variations, right? Everything that we teach is kind of on a spectrum.
So the hardest thing we've noticed for a lot of people is understanding that it's okay to make a request in a relationship. It's okay to request what you need in a relationship. That seems to be really hard for a lot of people. They want to take whatever comes to them, and whatever comes to them is not always good. So making that request is doing something for the relationship. Where a lot of people think if I request something out of the relationship, I'm going to damage the relationship. But if you request what you need out of a relationship and it damages the relationship, what kind of relationship was it to start with?
If I were to make your handout right now, I would add another principle under the little list of principles that we gave you. And I would probably write that one of the principles we operate out of is that relationships and connection have to be built. Relationships take work. They take effort. Connection, occasionally, you have those moments where connection just happens and I didn't ask much, I didn't request much, but that's not the stuff that real relationships are made of. So relationships are hard. We believe that. We believe they can be hard and they can also be amazing in the moments when they're not, right? But the reason people come to us for therapy typically is because there have been some hard relationships. So we believe pressure exists in relationships. We believe we have to make requests, we have to ask for things, and that we have to kind of, there's that dig deep in your soul at times in some of the relationships we're in when you want to quit because they're so stinking hard, right? That those are the times that we dig the deepest, and those are the relationships that can be so transformative for us. If you think about the relationships that have helped you grow into a better human being, it's typically your hardest ones. The ones where you had to dig pretty deep and make some changes. Being a parent, being a spouse, being a daughter, or being a son, right? It's your tough relationships. So one of the principles I would probably add is connection and relationships are built. It's not something that just happens.
So it would be very abusive of me to go in this pen and make this horse just do whatever I want out of the relationship, wouldn't it? So I want you to think about this. It's also very abusive of me to go into the pen with this horse and do everything on the horse's terms. That's just as abusive, because I'm still teaching this horse that in a relationship, one of you gets your needs met and the other one just has to forget about that part of it. Relationships where we both get our needs met. So I'm not going to go in here and just demand that this horse meets my needs, and I'm not going to go in here and just meet the needs of this horse, because that's just as abusive. I've seen lots of kids who have been taught that relationships happen on their terms. And by the time they come to us, their terms are pretty severe and are causing them to not have relationships anywhere, because they think relationships happen just on their terms. So I'm not going to do that to this horse. I'm not going to demand that this horse meets my needs, and I'm not going to go in there and just meet his needs, because I know that both of them are just as damaging to our relationship. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make a request. I'm going to request that this horse connect with me in some way. And I'm going to give him the choice of how he does that. But in that choice, I realize I still have to get my needs met too. And if this horse won't engage with me in any way, am I ever going to get my needs in this relationship met? Probably not. Just when this horse wants to do it. I can go in there and connect with this horse all day when he wants to connect. And this relationship can happen strictly on his terms. And what's it going to look like before long? His terms are not going to serve me very well. So I'm going to ask for what I need out of the relationship. I'm not just going to go in there and start hugging and petting this horse. How many of y'all did I do that with? The first time I met you.
I hope not.
Yeah, besides you, Jim.
Besides Richard. Richard and Jim both are raising their hands. Oh my God. We have to have men
You know
here
you
that
wouldn't
could-
do that to a person.
You did with Risha?
Well, with Risha, yeah. And look how she turned out.
No.
You wouldn't use something like that in a relationship with a human.
This is the nuanced stuff we're not going to go into this morning. This is some of the nuance and the art in this work, because actually Sarah Schlote will be presenting some on touch and the importance of touch. And there are some clients that absolutely, developmentally speaking, where they are is that you would build the relationship in that way, okay? So we have to think developmentally speaking where we are. This is some of the...
It's where it should start developing the minute you're born. But it doesn't for a lot of our clients. And when it doesn't, then touch becomes very inappropriate. And for me to go in there and start hugging all over this horse, since we have no relationship, would be like me walking up to you in Walmart and never having met you before and start doing that to you. Some of you would like it, and we would deal with those issues later. But most of you wouldn't like that. And if you did, in the end, that would blow up the relationship. So I'm not going to do that to this horse, and I'm not going to let that horse do this to me. I'm not going to let this horse do something to damage the relationship either. So I'm just going to go in and ask this horse to engage with me a little bit. And we're going to try to do some connecting through attachment, where we're being together and being connected. And this horse already telling me some things. He's already telling me that, yeah, I'm not afraid of that connection. I'm willing to do that, which is good. I like for them to be willing to connect. I just don't want them to only be willing to connect when it's just on their terms. So I'd like for them to be willing to connect with me when I ask them to. All right, so what's happening? This horse that I've never met before is willing to connect with me, willing to attach to me, and when it's on his terms, we get to find out how he wants to do that. Then that's okay. I need that information. I want to know how he feels about things. And when he says, I'd like to connect, I'm going to connect with him. But I know that this connection is not going to be real secure until we can be connected when we're not together. And if he starts to worry about this connection when we're not together, and is going to start trying to control how this connection happens all the time, where it's only happening on his terms, and that's going to get to be a problem sooner or later. Right now it looks pretty sweet, doesn't it? And I really haven't asked this horse to do anything yet. Have I? I haven't. It's nice that we can get connection without even having to ask for it. That's really nice. But sometimes it's nice to get it when we need it, not just when this horse needs it. And if this horse is so insecure about not being attached, then he's going to really start to try to control me instead of controlling himself. But if that's the way this relationship continues to build, then he's going to start having some behaviors that look like he's trying to control me a little bit. This horse doesn't seem to have a whole lot of worry about that. He seems to be fairly securely attached. So let's test it. Can he stay connected? Can he stay just as calm? Can he stay in his neocortex when I ask him to detach?
Y'all, the other thing to watch with him, we don't know him. I hate that we've not met him at all, but we don't know this horse. So to watch, what's the difference between doing the task and being connected? Right? Just watch and see if sometimes that's a feel. Sometimes there's something we see right in him. He seems so calm. He has a nice little soft eye. His head's down low. He seems nice and calm. And let's just watch though and see if there's a moment where it ever looks like he's maybe following around, but maybe, I can walk with somebody without connection, right? So just watch it, and y'all are getting to know him at the same time we are. He sure seems sweet at this point though, doesn't he?
So I'm going to ask him how he feels about being connected when we're not together. Because what's going to be the problem if he disconnects from me every time we're not together? One, he's going to start not wanting to detach. If we disconnect every time we detach, then detachment becomes a little unsafe for us. If Bettina and I disconnect every time we're not together, what happens? One, she's going to try to keep me from leaving if she knows I'm going to disconnect from her when we detach. She's going to say, well, then don't leave if you're going to disconnect.
Or I could choose not to connect when we are together.
So that's the
To
second
avoid
thing that would
the
happen.
pain of the disconnection, right?
Yeah. So let's see how this horse handles detachment. So I'm going to ask him to go away from me now, but I want him to stay connected with me. I'm going to stay real connected with him, and I'm just going to put some pressure on him to ask him to go away. And let's see how he handles that. Feels a little less certain about that, doesn't he? About our ability to be connected when we're not together. Little licking and chewing. This creates some anxiety for this horse, doesn't it?
So y'all, licking and chewing, kind of depending on when it happens, is one of the things we watch for with horses all the time, okay? Sometimes when you're making a request and they feel some pressure and they start that licking and chewing, sometimes it's sort of an attempt at a little bit of submission. So see y'all, he tried a little submission a minute ago. Tim had pressure on him, asking him to move away. He was like, okay, if I submit and start to appease you a little bit, will you take this pressure off? And when that didn't work, he tried trying maybe a little something else. Maybe if I resist just a little bit, maybe you'll quit. He's just trying to figure out what is it you're asking for?
So he says, fine, I'll detach, but I'm going to disconnect when I do. And he's clearly is not real comfortable about this part of it, is he?
You'll see him kind of looking out. He'll look out the pen. He's doing a little disconnecting.
He's trying to come back to me even though I'm asking him to go away. But now you see him drop back into the thinking part of his brain, get out of that survival resistance, and now he's starting to keep an ear on me a little bit and trying to reconnect with me a little bit. And when I think he's really trying to stay connected with me, I see this is, how about if I submit? If I just submit, will you let me come back? And it's not submission that I want. I don't want submission out of a relationship. And I don't want him to ask me to submit either. Because that's going to damage our relationship. If I submit, it's going to damage it. If he submits, it's going to damage it. I know, I'm sorry, buddy. He's trying to find the answers, and the answers he knows are not answers that are going to improve our relationship. So if I release the pressure while he's trying to do the wrong thing for our relationship, then I'm teaching him to damage our relationship. And I don't want that. I want him to do things that are going to improve our relationship. And this resistance is just his search for an answer. And I'm okay with him searching for an answer. I'm not going to ever punish my horse for searching for an answer. Because if I do, they'll quit searching for an answer and start to submit. And I want this to happen out of connection, not out of submission.
So y'all, anytime Tim starts to notice a little more disconnect, right, where this horse will start to look outside the pen a little bit or anything, y'all notice Tim, he does something to increase pressure a little bit to bring him back. He smooches, a little bit of a smooch. Especially those of you who've been already at some trainings, this little guy's showing us lots. He's really going back and forth between, he's kind of going, do you want me to, there's this, can I submit way over here? Can I throw a little bit of a fit way over here and connection somewhere in here? And he's just trying to find it.
So when he's nice and calm and not trying to submit and trying to reconnect, when I catch him in that place, then I'm just going to move my pressure from his middle back to his rear end and ask him to reattach. If he's connected with me, he'll come right back to me when I do that. Did he?
Tim, do you think this horse knows what it means when you move pressure to his rear?
Probably not.
Because y'all didn't do much of that.
But that's one of the things he's going to get to figure out in this connection is what is it he's asking for? He won't find that if he's trying to submit, because when he's submitting, he thinks submission is the answer and Tim will tell me what to do. If I tell him what to do, does he have to go into his neocortex to find an answer?
So the thing that seems interesting to me, Tim, is that it seems like he's just kind of on autopilot. He's just moving around the round pen.
So now every time I feel like he's ignoring me, I'm going to increase the pressure just a little. Because I want him to keep connected to me instead of going from this resistance to ignoring. I want him to stay connected. So anytime I feel like he's ignoring me, I'm going to increase the pressure a little bit. Anytime he's resisting, I'm going to try to keep the pressure the same. And every time I feel like he has really found the answer that improves our relationship, I'm going to release the pressure. See, he came back to me, but guess what? I didn't ask him to. He was doing that on his terms, not because that's what I asked of him. And this horse is great at having that connection when it happens on his terms. He's not real interested in what it is I want yet.
So to increase the pressure, you're directing your energy more towards his rear end in this particular case?
To increase the pressure, yeah, I just bring my body energy up. So smooching, it takes a little more energy out of me to smooch than it does to just stand here and keep my, if you notice, I'm keeping my belly button pointed toward his side, because that's where I want my pressure to be right now. So now, well, maybe I can just stand here and ignore all this. So as he ignores, I have to increase the pressure. And guess what's going to happen? What happens? What was this horse doing just then? He was dissociating a little bit. And when I increase that pressure, he kind of jumps out of that dissociation. If he had been present and engaged at that point, it wouldn't have been such a startled response. That startled response comes from, yep, I just checked out. I don't notice anything. That's dissociation.
Tim, did you hear me earlier when I said it seems to me like he's been dissociating for a long time, though, just walking around the pen?
Yeah.
He's just been on autopilot.
Yeah.
Dissociation's just checked out. Right, kind of that I'm on autopilot. I'm not connected and thinking about what I'm doing. Two things. Do you hear me, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay. One, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Did you hear that?
Two, this horse's name.
You got 5 minutes, buddy.
This horse's name is Jack.
Jack?
Yes.
Oh. Well, now that we know that, I can probably put my pressure back here at his rear, and he'll come right to me, won't you, Jack? So you see how he's still trying not to connect with me? He's telling me, no, if I can't have this relationship on my terms, I don't want it. If I can't have this connection on my terms, I'm not interested. And I want him to have it on his terms, but not just on his terms. We want to have this relationship on our terms. And we're negotiating what that is right now. All right, so did y'all see what happened then?
Did you?
I felt that he was trying to connect that time, so I moved my pressure from his middle back to his rear, and he turned toward me. So this is the start of us figuring out what's this relationship going to look like, and how do we make it work for both of us. So now I ask him to attach with me and follow me. And we've got the beginnings of a more secure connection. And now he starts to lick and chew, and that's okay, because I don't have any pressure on him right now. I don't mind him licking and chewing after I've released the pressure.
It's his way of relaxing. Oh, I got that. I figured that out.
And now we get the big, deep breath of, oh, yeah, I figured that out. And this is, relationships aren't something that happen in 5 minutes. They're not something that happen in an hour in the round pen with a horse. It's interactions throughout our lifetime that determine what this connection's going to be like. He's still not just real bought into having this relationship a little bit on my terms, is he? When it was all on his terms, did he pull his head away when I reached to touch him? No. But doing this where he has to think about what I want is a little tougher for him. And you know what? It's a little tougher for me too, to just ask for what I need instead of just take what he wants to give me. But I know we're not going to have a good, secure, attached relationship until it's happening where it's good for both of us. And by me just taking whatever he gives me, that's not good for me, and it's in the long term not good for him either.
All right. There's your crash course.
Thank you, Janet.